Fantastic. I can see some people starting to come through. This is great.
Mm.
Welcome, everybody. For those who have just joined, we're waiting for a couple more minutes just while people feed in. Okay, well, I will give us a brief introduction just while people are feeding in. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us at the EU Citizens Politics Festival. We are so happy to have everyone here, both the people joining us in the webinar and the people who are watching on Facebook. Hello to everybody. I am delighted to introduce you to Omri, who is from Alliance4Europe, who is going to be leading the session today on digital intelligence and a bit of training. You know, you're going to learn a bit of information about what digital intelligence is and go through some case studies. It's going to be really interactive, really fun. Super excited. So thank you so much, Omri, for being here today. I will just have a quick introduction about what we are doing with the EU Citizens Festival, and then we will start the event. So the whole point of the EU Citizens Politics Festival today and for the rest of the week is to engage young people in voting in the UK. So EU citizens are eligible to vote, and we want to make sure that people have knowledge about that. We get the word out, and most importantly, encourage young people to vote as well, because this is our home, and we want to make sure that everyone is engaged and know what their rights are. So the whole point of this is to raise awareness, but also to have a lot of fun. Like, we have a lot of really interesting events and lots of fantastic partners that we're working with. Alliance4Europe is one of the fantastic partners we're working with today. So I wanted to say thank you to everybody who's watching, and let's kick start. So Omri, I will pass it over to you.
Hey, thank you very much for that. It's great to be here, Antonia. Thank you for the invitation. It's really great to be here speaking to everyone watching on Facebook, everybody here. Thank you for joining. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and how I ended up here, about Alliance4Europe and what we do. And then we're going to go through some of the details and the story around disinformation online, how to deal with it, what this whole business with fake news is, and what we can all do to understand it better so we're not manipulated, and also how to interact with it to get our message out there in a clearer and better way. So my story and how I came to this is that I was originally born in Israel and then grew up moving all around Europe. And I lived in Switzerland, I lived in the Netherlands, in the UK. And through that, I basically experienced this European thing that we've all experienced if we are mobile EU citizens, which I guess this festival is aimed at, right? So this is something that we have in common, this experience of moving across borders, getting to a new place, discovering cultures, discovering new people. And this is something that I really appreciated growing up, especially coming from a country where you can't do that, because in Israel, you can't get in a car and drive across borders. The Middle East just doesn't work like that. But, you know, in the process of becoming European, you know, I discovered the joys of being in a peaceful, democratic environment and region that allows you to do that. So then towards the time that the Eurozone crisis started happening, you know, I was graduating from university, I was deciding what to do with my life, and I was seeing that a lot of this nationalism, populism, authoritarianism was rising and rising, right? This is something that we've seen, and it started maybe 10, 20 years ago, maybe even, and it's been going on ever since. And it felt very much like past mistakes continue to happen. So I thought to myself, it's quite important to actually do something about this. So this is when I ended up studying European affairs, ended up working in the European Parliament, ended up then doing human rights advocacy, working in the human rights field. And then towards 2016, of course, Brexit happened, Trump got elected, and quite a lot of us in the pro-European movement, we started thinking, okay, what do we do? What do we do so that in the 2019 European elections, we don't have a far-right authoritarian landslide, with all of these anti-Europeans? And what can we do to make sure that Brexit never happens again and we get a louder pro-European voice out there? And this is how Alliance for Europe was born. We had a convergence of these different movements, these different actors, and people from all over Europe, whether it's Pulse of Europe or the Good Lobby, the BMW Foundation, quite a few of these types of organizations got together, and we set up Alliance for Europe in order to activate citizens to engage towards a more democratic and more sustainable Europe, to be able to build larger coalitions of actors, whether it's civil society or the private sector or media, academia, to really bring together people for a louder voice on the pro-European agenda and the democratic agenda in Europe. And so we ran a large voter turnout campaign in 2019. And ever since then, we've been growing and activating different networks, building communities. So, we just launched together with partners a new cooperation platform called the European Hub for Civic Engagement. And so that's a place where you can share content, you can share material, you can coordinate campaigns and civic engagement from, with people from all over Europe. And then one of the main things that we've been focused on is really how to counter disinformation. And this is where I think I'm going to start sharing with you what I have in terms of slides and give you some more detailed information about disinformation. This is my my cue, my segue. So what I'm going to take you through is the dynamics around emotioneering and disinfonomics. Basically, what is this social phenomena operating like? What is the economic dynamics and psychological dynamics behind disinfonomics? And I am going to give a thank you to our head analyst, James Patrick, who put these slides together. Now, a bit of information, so the Social Media Intelligence Unit is a project that Alliance for Europe set up. And the idea is to give a louder voice to truth online and to be able to counter disinformation. What we want to do is increase the reach of people who are communicating on evidence-based, agendas, on democratic agendas, to be able to counter this very intentionally designed authoritarianism. And so the Social Media Intelligence Unit provides analysis, it provides monitoring, it provides consultancy and training in terms of how to shape messaging. And it's something that we would like to offer to civil society at large and to campaigners at large out there, and to really be able to provide some education and training to people at the organizational level, if you're a campaigner, that you want to get a message out there, and also at the individual level, as a private citizen, what can I do to understand disinformation better and to understand digital communications better, to be able to engage? And this is part of a larger vision of, how do we create a more ethical internet space? We live in this interconnected digital environment. The digital space really informs all aspects of our lives. We really need a values-based digital space, a values-based internet that respects human rights, that respects democracy, where these corporate business models become more ethical, so they're not abusive of people. And one of the key steps in getting to this ethical internet, this values-based and human rights-based internet, is to also train people, train citizens out there in what it means to be a digital citizen and how to engage in a healthy way with social media and with the internet at large. So this is part of the vision that the social media intelligence unit that we set up aims to achieve. So let's get into the meat of this. And what I'm going to try and do is also working together with Antonia, who's here managing the show. We're going to try and make this interactive, so it's not just me talking your head off. We can also have an interactive discussion. I think there's relatively few of us on the Zoom right now, so we can talk together if you like. So I'm going to introduce to you to the psychological dynamics of disinformation, and then we can discuss a little bit about your personal experience in that regard, and then we can continue from there. So, emotioneering, what does that mean? Emotioneering means that you're trying to manipulate people by manipulating their emotions, by designing a piece of communication that drives a certain emotional response. Now, when we talk about disinformation, this is like a bit of historical trivia for you, maybe if you want to, impress people at your next Zoom dinner party. Disinformation is not a new phenomenon. It's been around for a long time. The term itself was invented by Stalin after World War II to describe strategic use of intentionally false information in order to destabilize your enemies, essentially using information as a weapon. So just to be aware that there is a difference between misinformation, which is just wrong information. I could accidentally tell you something that is wrong because I didn't check, or because I made a mistake, because I misspoke. That would be misinformation. And then disinformation is explicitly designed intentionally and maliciously to mislead you. And that's emotioneering, essentially. Disinformation aims to achieve emotioneering. So to understand really what's happening out there and how all of this has been taking place, we need to understand a little bit about how the brain functions, right? We have all of this information coming into our brain from our screens, from our devices, from what our mom tells us in the morning, what we hear on the radio, or whatever your podcast equivalent of the radio is. You're getting all of this information, and you emotionally respond to it. And in your day-to-day life, we're relatively functional animals. As human beings, we're able to respond to the stimulus that we receive until something happens, a crisis response. We have something that is proposed to us as a threat. The sort of cave person model of the saber-toothed tiger comes out, or like the crocodile attacks you as you're fishing in the river. And what do? You have your three crisis response modes: your fight, flight, or freeze. This is something that probably isn't new to you. It's probably something that you've heard before, but usually we talk about this in the offline environment. So if you're you're crossing the road and suddenly there's a car coming at you, maybe you just freeze on the spot instead of getting out of the way. This is how we usually talk about it. But this basically introduces to us a certain type of tunnel thinking. We're focusing on things that only relate to the crisis. We're not thinking more broadly, right? Then what we have essentially in the online information environment is really stimulus that activates this kind of threat level, of things that aim to trigger your sort of basic fight, flight, or freeze response. And this is something that we're bombarded with 24/7. Now, if I may plug in a book recommendation for you, there is a book that's called Thinking Fast and Slow about how people make decisions. It's by the Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman. And he basically describes how most of the decisions that we make in life, most of the critical decisions, are made in our, what he calls fast thinking, in our intuition. Irrational decisions that are based on sort of built up worldviews that we have created over the years, and then just a trigger response that just kind of creates this sort of immediate intuitive action, which we then rationalize as part of a more conscious process, which is the slow thinking of, wait, why did I actually do this? You know, and this comes to down to your lizard brain, like your basic neurological functions, where you want to be either well-fed, or you want to be reproducing with someone, or you want to be in your fight, flight, or freeze mode. You know, so you're either looking for food, looking to reproduce, or, you know, looking to fight somebody or run away from something. And these are the basic responses that you have in your brain. And most of your decisions in life actually are based on those responses, which you then rationalize. We perceive it to be the other way around, right? We think we are very rational actors, that, you know, we go into a shop and we buy the products that we need just based on this and this and this. But in fact, no, we're buying things, we're choosing things based on these very intuitive choices. And this is something that psychologists and economists and neuroscientists in the last decade or two have also been able to show quite extensively. So this is something that we really need to take into account when we are exposed to disinformation online. All of these responses will play out as we go. So then, what we need to also take into account with this term of disinfonomics is that we have an entire media ecosystem around us. You know, it's not just us and our mom on Facebook. It's also, you know, Facebook as a platform operating with a certain algorithm, or Instagram or TikTok, whichever platform we're using. There's also all of these large media outlets that dominate the space, whether it's BBC or Channel 4 or CNN or whatever it is, or it could be some of our favorite influencers nowadays on YouTube and Instagram and all of these, you know, social media outlets. We have such a diverse environment that we're operating in. But a lot of these actors, they're not just in it for fun. You know, they need to make some money, they need to drive their clicks, and they want to grow their audience. They want to drive their engagement. So they're not looking at us and saying, oh yeah, well, you know, maybe Omri wants some information that I can give him. No, they're looking at, you know, how can I attract an audience? How can I get Omri to click on this? How can I get him to click on this again? You know, how can I get him to subscribe? How can I get him to pay for this product? How can I drive my advertising revenue, and so on? So disinformation feeds into that ecosystem. It doesn't operate in a vacuum. And this is something that has actually been a bit of a shift from how disinformation worked maybe 4 or 5 years ago to how it works now. Now, what we want to do is essentially understand this dynamic and understand how disinformation actors use this placement, the seeding of information to destabilize our conversation. So again, we have a definition of disinformation on the screen now. Basically, creating and sharing deliberately false information in order to achieve a certain geopolitical goal, in order to achieve a certain, maybe a commercial goal, whatever it is, but it's thought about in this sort of sense. So for example, if I am an authoritarian government that wants to destabilize Europe, maybe the best way to do that and the cheapest way to do that is to try and drive a disinformation narrative in Europe that, you know, vaccines are dangerous. You know, people shouldn't wear masks because they don't work. The entire COVID-19 epidemic is just this over-exaggerated hoax driven by the WHO and Bill Gates and, you know, these mysterious lizard people and whoever. So, and maybe the vaccines are full of microchips. And then if I spread around all of these disinformation narratives and conspiracy theories, well, you know, Europe is going to have a much harder time to deal with the pandemic. I won't need to spend very much money, but for example, you know, I won't have to worry about European economic sanctions against, you know, against me because of human rights violations or because I just tried to kill my leading opposition leader in the country. I guess you understand that, you know, I might be referencing, for example, the Russian government, or it could be other actors. So this is a space where certain disinformation actors are making these kind of decisions. Now, I'm not saying that there is a grand conspiracy. You know, it's important not to come into conspiracy thinking, but it's important to be aware that there is actual evidence of interference over time, and we've seen this reported in you know, very high quality verifiable data, you know, that you know, the social media intelligence unit has picked up on our side, and plenty of other people have picked up these sort of coordinated efforts, and they've been reported on extensively. So we're staying evidence-based here. We're not just pointing fingers. Now, the way that this has developed over time is that, you know, previously, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we had all of these bots and trolls and all of this ecosystem was full of fake accounts and people trying to drive through this kind of disinformation narratives with that kind of intensity of just sharing and spreading and sharing and spreading. What we have happening now is a new development, or at least it's been happening, you know, over the past year and a bit. What we have is disinformation actors buying into the fact-checking industry and the whole mainstream media industry by placing their narratives there and getting them picked up. So basically what we have is disinformation by definition is controversial, and controversy drives up clicks and engagements and views and people watching and people engaging for, you know, CNN or the BBC or whoever you are that wants to drive clicks to your website. Or if you're fact checking as your main sort of role in trying to counter disinformation, then, you know, you want people to see your fact checks. But what actually happens when you're being fact checked, or when you are fact checking, what you're doing essentially is you're repeating the lie, right? In order to fact check a lie, I need to tell you that the lie is there to begin with. So I'm going to give you a very obvious example. When Boris Johnson said we're going to give 350 million pounds, wrong currency. We're going to give 350 pounds a week to the NHS because now we give 350 million pounds a week to the EU, and we're going to Brexit and then give that money over to the NHS instead. When I tell you, no, that isn't true, the UK never actually paid 350 million pounds a week to the EU, and none of that money is now going to go to the NHS. I need to tell you what Boris Johnson said first, right? So I need to repeat the lie to you, and then immediately I'm having a debate with you about whether that lie is true or not. It's basically like the psychological experiment that you might have heard of don't think of an elephant, you know? If I tell you, do not think of an elephant, what do? You think of an elephant and then you go, ah, I thought about it. Oh, you know, but it's just how the mind works. You call up the thing that I mentioned to you, and then that's the thing that we debate. And so, as you can see, what happens when media outlets start reporting on a disinformation narrative or a disinformation story is that they start, you know, this revenue cycle of increasing their clicks, increasing the advertising revenue that they get from the clicks. And then, you know, there's a whole economy that develops around reporting disinformation. And 1 second, I'm just gonna check. For some reason, I'm seeing that my slides have frozen. I'm gonna reshare for a second. Pardon this. Yeah, we're just, boom. Okay, next slide. So what are disinformation actors doing then in response to this entire process? What they're doing is they're looking at how to insert their disinformation narrative into this whole cycle, this whole media cycle. And so they're looking at what point, you know, do I insert this? At what point do I get engagement? At what point do I see, you know, what change I've created in the narrative, and then how do I respond from there? And this is something that then makes their lives a lot easier because they can just rely on our sort of mainstream media to kind of do the job. And, you know, when I talk about mainstream media, it's also, I'm not casting aspersions. I'm not saying, you know, that there is an intentional desire to create this. I don't have anything much, you know, against the mainstream media in the way that, you know, Donald Trump might have. I think there are a lot of people out there trying to do a good job, but a lot of the times, you know, the economics of it basically speaks for itself. You know, it's the same thing as getting Nigel Farage on Question Time over and over and over and over again for 15 years or 20 years until Brexit happened. If the BBC hadn't put Nigel Farage on Question Time all the time, maybe he wouldn't have had such a large platform and maybe Brexit wouldn't have happened. But the BBC put him on Question Time over and over and over again and gave him legitimacy because he was just entertaining to watch. He was kind of like a Jeremy Clarkson of racism. So so they just put him on again and again and again, and it drove their audience and it gave legitimacy to something that it shouldn't have done, right? And it's the same thing here. Now, so what should the mainstream media do? Maybe we need better editorial guidelines. Maybe we need a more responsible and a deeper understanding of this process by large media outlets where they report on disinformation differently, when they approach this with slightly more care. But this is a larger discussion to be having. The question here that we're talking about is what can you do as an organization or as a campaigner to tackle this. And
Omri, quick thing.
I'm gonna go
the
for
slides aren't showing.
Sure. Once
we're just gonna refresh it really briefly.
Yeah,
this is so interesting now.
Okay, 1 second, then I'm gonna, I think my computer just
there we go.
1 moment.
All fixed.
Okay, good. Yeah, here we go. So I think before we go any further, you know, this is, in case you didn't see this before, then this is basically what I was talking about in terms of how disinformation actors deal with the media cycle of trying to place things at the right time. But I think what would be cool is if anyone here would like to ask a question or engage, we can have a bit of a dialogue. And yeah, I also opened up my chat box to see to see better because, you know, my screen is taken up. But yeah. I don't know, Lara, maybe we haven't spoken before, but maybe you would like to come in with some thoughts. I'm just seeing you in the chat.
Yes, I think we missed the question. If we can just repeat what the question was.
Yes, so I would like to ask you how you've encountered this, if there is examples that you've seen in terms of disinformation narratives and how you've tried to engage with them in the past.
And for anyone watching on Facebook as well, you can also comment and we can see your comment as well, and we can come in. If anybody wants to come in on the webinar on Zoom, feel free to put your hand up and I will bring you in. Okay, so I can see that Laura is coming in, so I'm just going to bring her in now.
Hello.
Hello, Lara.
Hi, yeah, it's very good. I'm from Brazil, so disinformation is quite heavy there. And I don't know about how to combat it. It's always on my mind. Like I see that a lot of my family members are in certain group chats and Facebook groups that deliberately share disinformation. And this, as you said, not misinformation, is very explicit disinformation, but has gotten to a stage where lots of them believe it quite heavily. So it's very difficult to counter that from my point of view.
Yeah, and how have you tried to counter it in the past? What have you thought about it in the past?
I always try to share like articles that I find and things like that, but the information that they receive on these groups is very simple, like just like one line there that tries to present a whole picture. And when I try to give a whole article for someone to read, they're reluctant to take the time to look into that. And then it's easier to believe in something that is short and simple. So I haven't really found the best way of challenging that. And then I always get thrown the term like, oh, you're not an expert either. So it's just me based on the articles that I have read versus information that they have received from other people that title themselves as experts.
Yeah. So I think, sharing good information is a very good way of tackling this, and we'll get a little bit more into how you can kind of structure the information you share in a way that sets a narrative, that sets your own agenda in a way, rather than chasing after every individual lie, basically enabling people to seek out better information. And is there anyone else? What do you think?
Yes, we have one from Facebook. So we have one from Jean, and they ask, they say, I have just had the message that the NHS website crashed today. Is this a classic example of keeping people in the fight, flight, freeze?
I think that's an interesting point. Hi, Jane. I have to say that I haven't seen that the NHS website crashed, so I can't verify any high quality information in that regard. If it's a lie, then perhaps yes, it could be part of a strategy of basically saying part of a narrative of why the way the government is doing things is wrong, or whether the whole approach to COVID is wrong because maybe we just need to, not get vaccinated or something like that. It could be, but that's just pure speculation. I would have to look at it and see. If the NHS website has genuinely crashed because a lot of people are trying to get vaccinated in the UK, then that's probably a good thing. That's probably good that people are interested in scientifically protecting themselves from the virus. And I do think that overall in the public debate in the UK, there is a significant challenge at the moment, right? Because Boris Johnson has been one of the biggest drivers of disinformation in the UK. You know, the whole referenced bus bus story, and basically a lot of what he says is disinformation. But then it's very important to be able to engage on COVID-19 as an evidence-based phenomena. So, you know, if you say, okay, Boris Johnson is a liar, therefore I will not believe anything that he says on COVID, then you have a problem, because some of what he says on COVID is still relevant, right? It's still coming through scientists and experts and so on. So he's kind of being held to saying factful things. And then sometimes he also lies. So then the UK is in a very delicate situation of having a government that has used lies as a tool for political expedience, but at the same time has to give factful information to its citizens in order to get through this crisis and actually get people vaccinated. So it opens up a very confusing situation for citizens in the UK at the moment. And I think that that's something that we really have to contend with. And as we come out of this crisis, I think there's going to be a lot of learning to do about information and government accountability and that sort of thing. So this is me speaking for a while. Is there anything further, Antonia?
Let's see, we have nothing else on Facebook as of now. For everyone watching, feel free to put your comments in on the Facebook Live. We're reading them, we're engaging with them. So it's a great way to get involved if you're not in the webinar. For those who are in the webinar, feel free to put your comments in chat or raise your hand and you'll be able to come in and talk as well. But for now, let's continue.
Fantastic. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is take you through a bit of a case study of how this really happened in real life. And it's going to be an example from the past. So you're going to be able to see, to put it into context of how it's developed up to the current place where we're at. So 1 second, for some reason, I'm seeing that my, here we go. Yeah, it's just my computer is being a little bit slow in moving through the slides, but we'll just bear with it. So basically QAnon. We all now know what QAnon is. I probably don't need to explain it to you. It's this really, really, really crazy conspiracy theory about liberals out there running the world through some kind of conspiracy. It's basically about a cabal of baby-eating cannibals. It's all very, very strange. There are some very deep and ugly and disgusting elements of anti-Semitism that are embedded in this, because this whole idea of a QAnon, of a global conspiracy that eats children, is basically activating some of the deepest and most disgusting medieval anti-Semitic tropes. So that's important to be aware of as well. And here I go again, you know, this is don't think of an elephant. This is me explaining to you what QAnon is, thereby reinforcing QAnon's kind of message that they exist, because what they want you to do first and foremost is know that they exist. But because they've reached such a level of mainstream recognition now, because of Donald Trump and so on, then this is just part of the reality at the moment. But I'm going to show you a little bit of how it got there. So back, if we go to the August 2020, and that whole sort of time where QAnon first sort of emerged as a phenomenon that the mainstream media was talking about, a lot of analysts and people observing the far right, and you know, some of our team with SMIU, for example, and other people in the space watching Disinformation, saw that this kind of stuff was developing, but it wasn't very high up on the media agenda. What we then saw last summer is that we had this horrible woman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a representative in the Republican Party in the US. basically spewing QAnon together with this guy, Matt Gaetz, who's now in the news for his own genuine sex trafficking offenses. So great crowd over there. And then Trump basically refusing to say that QAnon is wrong. You know, CNN asked him at the press conference, what do you say to QAnon? And he said, well, you know, I don't know. If they like me, that's great. And that obviously boosted the visibility that QAnon had. So then we were seeing that most of this really was happening in the English-speaking world. It mostly was happening in the US, and then mostly in the United Kingdom, and Canada, and Australia, and so on. It was an English-speaking conspiracy at this point. But then we saw that, you know, this was trending and shifting and growing, also in mainstream media coverage. And you can see some of the most prevalent hashtag use at the time, and the fact that they basically took a ride on Save the Children as a hashtag, you know, because QAnon is trying to save the children from these imaginary cannibals, supposedly. So then what we saw is that there was a lot of fact checking going on around QAnon, explaining what it was in PolitiFact and these other, you know, very reputable and legitimate fact checking sites. And this started driving the discussion around QAnon. What is it? You know, everyone's seeing it in the news. Everyone's, you know, turning on CNN or turning on their Facebook feed and seeing QAnon, and wants to understand what it is and understand why it's a lie and so on. And then suddenly there is this huge increase in the number of websites that are publishing about QAnon. So we have the Daily Beast, we have The Hill, we have New York Times, we have The Guardian, we have Forbes. All of these are high quality, reputable news outlets, right? They are critical of QAnon, but they are repeating QAnon entries. And then this in turn drives the search engine algorithms, because we're all Googling things, we're all searching for things, and Google uses that to then give us more stuff, you know, so we're being given more of this disinformation narrative that is packaged by these mainstream broadcasters and media outlets. And then what we're seeing is that people are seeing more and more of this repeated through the algorithms. So the algorithm is basically giving it over and over to people as they are looking for it, as the media drives the discussion forward. And then we have again this situation migrating to Germany, where we have Russia Today, which again is a Russian government outlet, which drives Russian propaganda, Russian government propaganda, and Russian government geopolitical agenda, essentially. We're seeing them starting to spread this across Europe and Germany. And then we're seeing that at this time, we have some key elements, you know, that drive the mainstream discussion, which one of them came from a Jewish forum for democracy and against anti-Semitism. And then we're seeing coverage of these, you know, specific QAnon protests and people organizing on the far right with this kind of stuff. So essentially what happened was that this was given broader media coverage in Germany on QAnon, and then we saw an increase in the amount of space that this was taking up in the German media. And then we saw that this then helped catalyze, helped accelerate this whole process of people coming out protesting against masks, and so on. And we saw, in fact, that this led to a very strange situation also of people who are, neo-Nazis and far-right activists protesting next to people who are, your kind of new age yoga teachers and people who are just have critical views of what's happening, but they fell into a rabbit hole of mixing in with this far right propaganda because they maybe were targeted online and didn't see that it was actually far right propaganda. They kind of fell into it and went to an anti-mask protest or something like that, anti-lockdown protest, standing next to a neo-Nazi, where until a month ago they had nothing to do with neo-Nazis whatsoever, and they probably still don't. But they're kind of promoting that same agenda without knowing it, and this is a big problem. And this is why we need this kind of digital awareness and digital citizenship. So then, where do we end up? We have psychology being both a friend of ours, as in a way of dealing with it, and also a problem if we don't know how to deal with this psychological element here. And here, in case, I hope you're still following all this information and so on. We just went through a lot of data about the QAnon example. We went through quite a bit of data on how this whole thing works to begin with, right? What I'm going to do now is really take you through what can we do about it, right? Because this is an important element. This is what we want at the end of the day. And it's really not all that complicated when you think about it. What we want to do is use this same sort of desire for protection that we all have, and desire for community that we all have, to drive people towards an evidence-based set of information, right? So rather than using this fight, flight, and fear dynamic and this sort of quick thinking, intuitive dynamic to manipulate people with fear, what we want to do is to alleviate people's fear by building trust and building a collective sense that we know what's really happening. If you notice, I don't know how often you've managed to speak to someone who's really diehard in their belief in disinformation. Maybe Lara, you mentioned people in Brazil believing disinformation and believing conspiracy theories. One of the first things that you notice about people who believe conspiracy theories is that they will tell you what really happened. It's not what you think, it's what really happened is this. Kennedy wasn't really shot by this and this guy. He was really assassinated by the CIA, la 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 la. We didn't really, or the US never really landed on the moon. What really happened is they filmed that thing in a Hollywood studio, blah 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 blah. So what really happened in this pizzeria in Washington D.C. wasn't people eating pizza. What really happened is Hillary Clinton did blah 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 blah. So they can tell you what really happened. And that is part of this sense of a collective. They want to be in the know. We all want to be reassured that we know the right thing, that we are smart, that we are with it, that we're being accepted for what we think and what we know. It's this sense of self-validation that gives us the desire to believe in what we believe, and that gives us the desire, this subconscious desire to say, okay, I believe this now, and I believe it because it's true, la 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 la. This is when you do your rationalization for why you believe what you believe. But if we all reflect on ourselves right now, with the 3 million community, with the Alliance4Europe community, with all of the Remain campaigners in the UK, why do we believe what we believe? like, sure, we have our reasons, we have our rational arguments, we have all those things, right? But at the same time, we want to feel like we belong. We want to feel like there are other people that agree with us. Yeah, and Lara's responding in the chat. They feel pride in being a selected few that know more. Exactly. This is basically it. So we as pro-Europeans, we also want to feel, you know, in our own experience, you know, I am justified in being an EU citizen in the UK, or an EU citizen living in Brussels, because this is my life experience. I want to believe that the EU is a good thing, because I'm a product of that life, right? So it's going to be very difficult for someone to come over to me and say, like, no, 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 we should, you know, be anti-European, we should be in favor of closed borders and so on, because that's not my life experience. So by creating this sense of community, this sense of inclusion around the information that we have, it's, you know, it's much easier for me to say, okay, the EU is a good thing because, and that makes me feel part of the community. So with this sort of aspect, with this sort of approach in mind, what we can do is understand how to create a sense of collective common sense, which is a term that was created by Serge Moscovici, the psychologist. And so if you see some information for the first time, you compare that information to what you already know. And this is your life experience. So for example, if you're a young student that's just done their Erasmus and you want to understand, you know, why the EU is a good thing and why you enjoy your Erasmus, you take that piece of information about, you know, European cooperation being a good thing. You take the information about, wow, I really had a good time about my Erasmus, and you compare those. And then you discuss this with your friends, you create a peer group and so on, where you see that people around you have a certain belief together. You then have a certain set of messages that are your kind of go-to when someone asks you, like, hey, why are you voting Remain, or why are you doing this? Why are you coming to this the 3 Million Festival and the EU Citizens Festival? You know, oh, I'm doing this because, you know, I want the EU to rejoin the UK eventually at some point in the future, or the UK to rejoin the EU. I mean, or I really want the UK to remain a diverse and tolerant. You know, I'm from a country, and my experience in living in different countries is really good. So this is a critical step, and this is where the far right and the extremists have been much better at this than the pro-European side in the last, you know, 5, 6, 7 years that we've seen. It's much easier to tell people these migrants are coming over here, la 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 la, and this entire fear and lizard brain situation than telling people, well, you know, in fact, the EU has contributed 1.7 billion euros in this, you know, giving people the stats. You know, people don't care about the stats, they care about what they feel, what their experience is. So this is where we need to develop our own emotive narratives and our own sense of what's happening, and we need to be able to share and compare that the information we're getting is equivalent across our peer group, and then we need to try and engage other people in our peer group, right? So we're not chasing after other people in order to tell them, you believe in a lie, you know, this is the lie and this is what you should believe in. Because then what you've done is you've repeated the lie to them and you've pissed them off, and you've made sure that they go like, no, I believe in my identity. You know, I believe that I know that, you know, the EU is the worst thing since the Soviet Union or something. This is what I believe. It's part of my identity. You just told me it's a lie. Well, I don't like you anymore. What we need to do is to be able to set an agenda in a way that tells this person, well, this is a reliable piece of information about the European Union that enables you to see what it is, you know, and to be able to include people in a narrative where they change their way of evaluating what they know. So you tell them, you introduce them into a new select group that know good information. And this is how you create the move from people believing disinformation narratives to people maybe choosing to indulge in higher quality information. But the most important thing is to now I'm going to move forward. The most important thing here is to be able to get 1 second, to be able to set your own substantive agenda here, rather than driving and fitting into another person's agenda. So one element to really keep in mind here is that you have 3 types of trust capital, and this is, you know, also in terms of the outreach that you have as a media organization or as a campaigner. This is a key component of your media strategy. You have certain amount of reach or a certain amount of trust that is owned by you and by your identity as an organization or as a person, the people that are in your immediate community that you talk to directly, and that that basically are in your ecosystem directly. Then you have earned traffic or earned trust, where other people, other organizations, other outlets repeat what you say, so that, you know, if the 3 million gets into the Guardian, then people who read the Guardian go, maybe I like the 3 million, you know, and the 3 million has just earned a certain amount of trust, a certain amount of exposure. And that's quite a critical element here. And then you have, you know, the paid advertising aspect of it. So if you're marketing online, you're getting your ideas out there, but then, you know, it's a little bit harder to get trust with that. You cannot buy trust, you have to cultivate it. So you really need to make sure you're getting the right message out there. But basically, what you need is to have a dynamic where you're extending your narrative and your line of communications, and you're using your own facts, your own narrative, rather than chasing after somebody else's. And then,
yeah, wait, I'm just going to come in. We have a quick question from Facebook that I think is really, really interesting and very relevant to what you're saying. Some of the people on Facebook are asking how to kind of infuse accountability here. So accountability to politicians, to journalists, to the media who are maybe spreading this misinformation. Like, what can society do as a whole to kind of hold people accountable when spreading misinformation?
Yeah, this is a very, very big question, right? So thank you, people of Facebook who asked me about this. I think that, you know, we have to develop a whole set of solutions here. And so it might take me a minute or two to answer this, because there's not one easy answer, but there's a few things that I can say. First of all, when it comes to the social media platforms, they need to take responsibility for the information that is contained there. You know, we often have a tendency to think, and these platforms have a tendency to say, that, oh, well, you know, it's just people out there speaking, saying things, you know, it's their freedom of speech or whatever it is. You know, it's out of our hands, you know, whatever happens, happens. And this is very economically convenient for Facebook, because, you know, the more disinformation there is, the more anger and fear there is, the more people click on stuff, the more advertising there is. And actually there are studies that show that, you know, the overwhelming majority of people joining hate groups on Facebook in the US, you know, with white nationalism and so on, they joined these groups because Facebook recommended it to them. You know, so on your suggested groups or suggested information, you are just being offered more of the stuff that you have. So, you know, part of, you know, how the Capitol riots were able to organize is because all of these people over several years were just brought together by the Facebook algorithm, where if I'm looking up white nationalist, you know, potentially terrorist information on Facebook, Facebook tells me, well, here you go. Here's another terrorist group that you might be interested in joining. And that's clearly not okay. Facebook is not a public platform. This is something that we need to remember. It's a private company. The same goes for Google and YouTube. The same goes for, you know, all of these outlets. And so the things that we put on Facebook are not free speech. They are speech, but they are speech in a private space. And this is an important consideration. So we need to really remember there is a difference between hate speech and free speech. You know, so I have free speech as long as I don't hurt you, you know, but as soon as I say, everybody here, please go and, you know, hurt Antonia, for example, that's the end of my free speech. That's just not how a democracy works. You can't go out there and hurt people with your speech. You cannot, you know, that the American judge that said in the early 20th century, his name is Oliver Wendell Holmes, he said, you do not have the right to shout fire in a crowded theater, right? You probably heard that term, that line. It comes from a famous court case ruling in the early 20th century that kind of established this principle. And so these media platforms need to take responsibility for what they do, and things that are truly, you know, damaging, hate speech, dangerous stuff needs to be taken down on the basis of some clear guidelines. Now, on the other hand, when it comes to bad information, disinformation, we need to be really, really very careful about how we handle it, because once we start censoring everybody, we're on a very, very slippery slope, and democracy really depends on having a diversity of information, right? But what these media platforms should do is essentially have a ranking system for the quality of the information that is there. So if you have a trusted news organization that applies high journalistic standards and has a commitment to evidence and so on, like the Associated Press or Reuters or the Guardian or the New York Times and so on, they should have a higher ranking, and maybe the algorithm should be changed so that they are able to promote higher quality information. And then there should be sort of a balance between the amount of people that are clicking on it and the amount of, you know, reliability that it has. And then, you know, a publication like the Daily Mail or the Express or Breitbart or whatever, they probably deserve to have a lower reliability metric on such a thing. And this should not be, you know, up to the platforms themselves. It should be up to regulators. It should be up to lawmakers, because the platforms really have no interest in doing this. They have their business model that makes them more money the more clicks they drive, you know, the more advertising that they sell. So, you know, we have a process that is ongoing now with the EU guidelines on disinformation. And, you know, there's a commission consultation that is taking place where all of you can actually tell the commission what you think. Usually it's not very well known out there in the universe that these things happen, but you can actually contribute directly to what the commission process is. And it's very important for the EU as a whole to draw up guidelines that are democratically decided by the European Parliament, by the Commission, by the Council, on how this is handled. And then I'm going to take it a step further, and I would say that we need a genuine public space on the internet. right? So once we've done all of this regulating of the large platforms, we need to consider that in a capitalist economy, having a monopoly is not a good thing, right? So if all of your chocolates and all of your shoes are sold to you by one shop, right, and you cannot get shoes anywhere else, or you cannot get chocolate anywhere else, what would happen to your shoe prices, right? Your shoe prices would skyrocket, and suddenly you're paying £1,000 for a pair of shoes because you can't get them from anywhere else. The same is true of your social media space. If all of your social media space is owned by one or two or three large companies, then what interest do they have in making you happy? You have nowhere else to go. So to me, the fact that Facebook owns WhatsApp and owns Instagram is very, very problematic. Facebook needs to be broken up into many different pieces, I think, and they can stay compatible with each other. So it's not like you're going to have to look for your friends on a million different platforms, but we can build it in such a way that the space is owned by different people that have a genuine interest to give you a high quality service. And that applies to Google, it applies to Amazon, it applies to Apple, etc. All of these companies just need to be broken up. And that needs to be a concerted effort by the EU and by the US, I think. And then beyond that, we need a genuine public, and by which I mean, that is co-owned by governments or maybe media cooperatives, that is democratically accountable, having websites, having an ecosystem online that is genuinely public, so that when you speak on it, you really are exercising your free speech in a public debate, rather than pretending to express your free speech on a private platform, or in an enclosed capsule that is manipulated by private interests. So this is what I would say, and what we need to do is basically hold lying politicians to account by voting them out, by turning out to vote. This is why I'm going to plug in the the Our Home, Our Vote campaign here, and make sure that if you are an EU citizen living in the UK, that you go out to vote on the 6th of May. And there are all the registration deadlines and so on. Make sure that you're on those, make sure that you get registered, make sure that you're there to vote. We really need to vote out people who lie to us, and we need to get organized to do that. Thank you, Antonia, for the link. The link is now in the Zoom chat. So this has been a really long answer to the question, but I warned you in advance that it was going to take a while to answer this question. So I'm gonna move ahead just to wrap up. We're about to end this presentation. So yeah. So the main message, I just gave all of these kind of big things that we should do about regulating the platforms, breaking up the platforms, creating a public values-based internet, and so on. But the main thing that you can do as a user, as a campaigner, is not to react, but to really take action. So when you see a piece of disinformation online, just sort of getting worked up about it and putting in your angry comment is probably not the way to do it. Or just saying, oh, look, this is a lie, and tweeting or posting an angry comment isn't useful. I often have to stop myself because I really enjoy being outraged at ridiculous things. But I need to try and funnel my outrage into constructive action. So what we need to do, knowing that disinformation is going to be around with us, that COVID-related disinformation is going to be around with us. So what we need to do is use these psychological principles to basically advance our communications, and not to use them to manipulate anyone, but to actually be able to include people in our community, to extend the hand and say, look, I have information in my community that would benefit you, and here you go, here's the bridge, here's the hand that I'm extending for you to become a trusting member of our community, because this is the knowledge that we have. In the same way that the conspiracy theorists, you know, do this, but to basically extend your own information and your own narrative rather than chasing after someone else's, and building that collective common sense in a way that drives your narrative forward. And the last thing that is that it says there on the slide is to occupy the information space first. This is key. So you probably have heard of Steve Bannon and his mischief making around the world and trying to destroy democracy. And then, you know, recently he was arrested for ripping off his donors and living large off donations to build the wall. But anyway, it's good that there is some some justice at hand. But what you need to consider is that Bannon said, you know, to encapsulate the Trump strategy, he said, flood the zone with shit, basically. And if you've lived through the last 5 years, kind of looking at what's happening in the media, that's what Trump did all the time, flood the zone with shit. Basically, another tweet, another press conference, another scandal. There's one scandal happening over here, and boom, there's another scandal happening over there. And you're constantly keeping your opposition bamboozled with all of these different pieces of disinformation. So we don't have time to talk about the secret Chinese bank account because Trump just tweeted this about Qanon, and he just tweeted that about stealing the elections, and he just tweeted that about, you know, and we only have about 5 minutes to kind of be outraged about every single scandal until we actually get to the next scandal. That's flooding the zone with shit. And although I'm sure that this goes very well with Trump's personality and that he just did this for attention, there is also a clear strategy behind it. And many other authoritarians like Vladimir Putin or Erdogan in Turkey, or, you know, many others who have used this as well. And Boris Johnson actually has used this very well too. And he's used media manipulation. You know, if you remember this whole thing that he said about, I like to draw buses. You know, they asked him, what do you like to do in your free time? And he said, I like to paint buses. That's very, very strange. I can promise you that Boris Johnson has never painted a bus in his life, or if he has, it doesn't really matter. What he did there was to divert the attention away from the big 350 million lie bus, you know, and move it towards this, you know, I like to paint buses, so that the combination of bus and Boris takes you to somewhere else on your search engine when you search for a Boris bus. And that's a bit of search engine manipulation, that it gives you an idea of, you know, these disinformation actors are relatively sophisticated. They don't do things by accident. But, you know, now that we've understood this flood the zone with shit, what do? We flood the zone with high quality information, with evidence-based information, with our own narrative, and with emotively charged information that can make people feel included, and creating this common sense, this collective common sense, and basically approaching, first of all, mobilizing your own community, so people that agree with you, then extending to what's called the persuadables, people who are swinging in the middle and don't really know what to believe, and then extending a hand to the other side, but not by shouting at them that you're wrong, this is terrible, but by giving them a chance to be validated by believing the information that you believe, by making them feel like the select few that believe the truth, you know? So this is this has been just an overview of the dynamics in play at how to do this. and basically how to cut the cord on a lot of this disinformation and material that you're seeing on a day-to-day. And so I'm happy to take more questions and more discussion if anything has come up on Facebook so far. In the meantime, you can also follow Alliance for Europe on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn. You can find us at Alliance for Europe, basically with a 4, so the number 4. And if you just look that up, you will hit us. And sign up for our newsletter as well, and we'll keep you updated, basically. But thank you. I'm gonna check what has just come up on the chat. Yes, if you have any questions and comments, feel free, and Facebook included.
Yeah, so we'll wait for a couple more minutes just in case anyone who is watching on Facebook or anyone in the webinar wants to come in with a couple of questions, and we can ask them live. But if we don't have any questions, then I would just like to say thank you so much to Omri for this fantastic presentation. I learned so much, and I'm sure everybody else watching at home did as well. It's so important to be able to talk about these things and to raise information and to understand why misinformation exists and how it spreads in order to be able to stop it. So this was really insightful, and thank you so much. I'm going to be pasting the link to your Facebook page, and I'm sure you can find, links to the newsletter and to their other social media on that as well. So I'm posting the link to their Facebook page, both on the webinar and on our Facebook. So feel free to engage with Alliance for Europe afterwards. If you have any questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer it over Facebook or through email and things like that. But thank you so much, Omri, for coming and for hosting today. That was so informative and engaging, and it was fantastic.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for the invite. Good luck with the rest of the festival. And it's so important what you're doing. Turning people out to vote is the best and most important thing that we can do as citizens to really tackle these things and let politicians know that they're going to be held accountable. So all the best of luck to you.
Yes.
Feel free to get in touch, and feel free to provide our contact details and whatever to anyone who wants to follow up, and have a great rest of the afternoon.
Yes, thank you so much. So everyone on Facebook is just saying thank you. We have no more questions. And I do want to remind everyone who's watching that the deadline to register to vote in the UK is this Monday. So make sure you're registered. It's free, takes 5 minutes, really, really important. The local elections are on the 6th of May. So make sure you go out and get registered as well. And for anyone who really enjoyed this session, we have so many more coming up. We have 2 sessions a day, 3 on the weekend. So make sure that you are signed up to our newsletter to get that invite. But thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I'm going to end the session there, and that is perfect. So